Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we are changing the mental health narrative, bringing hope and solutions. Here's your host, Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist.
Brad Yates is known internationally for his creative and often humorous use of emotional freedom techniques, known as EFT. Brad is the author of the best-selling children's book, The Wizard's Wish. He's also the co-author of the bestseller, Freedom at Your Fingertips, and he's a featured expert in the film, The Tapping Solution. So Brad, thank you so much for joining us here today.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I was hoping you could start us off by telling us a little bit about how you got into the work you do and what drives your passion for it.
Yeah. How does a grown man find himself tapping on his face for a living?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah. I always knew I would be doing this work. I actually started out as an actor, and I had traveled the world doing theater and then decided it's time to go be a movie star in Hollywood, as one does. And while I was there, I met a woman, fell in love, got married. And when our first child was on the way, I started thinking it might be good to have a backup job to help raise this family. And I had always been fascinated by the power of the mind. So I trained to become a hypnotherapist. And I started building a hypnotherapy practice along with my acting career. And after a couple of years, when our second child was on the way, I thought, doing this personal development work really feels like my calling. This is what really feels great. This is where I feel my talents are best used. So we packed up, left Los Angeles, and moved to Northern California to be closer to our families. And while in this process, through some other hypnotherapists, I heard about this energy therapy and this tapping process. And I thought, okay, that sounds interesting. I'll give it a try. Went to this conference and took a course with Gary Craig, the founder of Emotional Freedom Techniques, or EFT, and really fell in love with this technique, especially when he had us tapping on chocolate cravings as a demonstration. And I was a bit of a chocoholic at the time. And I went from an 8 or a 9 out of a scale of 1 to 10 craving to not being able to eat chocolate for 2 years in a matter of minutes. So I thought, okay, that's really interesting. And after that conference, I started integrating the tapping into my hypnotherapy sessions. And then little by little, they became tapping sessions. And then YouTube came along, and I thought, hey, wouldn't it be really cool if there was a tapping video that people could start their day with? And I'll call it Tap of the Morning. And it was all I intended to do on YouTube. That's it. Now I've got a tapping video on YouTube. And it was about 6 months later before I put up my second video, and then another month or so before this third one. And here we are now with over 1,000 videos on YouTube.
Which is how most people, I would imagine, find out about you.
Yeah. It was trying to make tapping, this simple technique for down regulating stress and helping us shift our mindset and create better outcomes. I just wanted to make that as available to people as possible. So creating these short videos on different subjects that people could easily share with other people and say, hey, this looks a little weird, but try it. You'll feel better.
And so the way most people find you is people like me say, well, go listen to Brad on YouTube, because, I don't have as many YouTube videos. And so you can follow along with Brad and tap while he's showing you how to tap on the video, and you can get really good results. What other things other than just the YouTube videos do you do?
Once upon a time, I did live events. And actually, I just did my first live event in Ohio last week, which was great. It's the first one I've done in almost 2 years, because I travel around the world and do live events, which really fulfills that actor inside of me, having a live audience there. And then I do private sessions and group workshops online.
So are the live events something in line with what you encountered when you went to Gary Craig's live events?
That sort of thing. He was more teaching the process. And for me, it's more a matter of just guiding people through it. And I get suggestions from folks in the audience as to What stops you from being the best version of yourself? What stops you from having what you really want to have and taking the actions you want to take? And so we look at those limiting beliefs and those fears of, I'm not good enough, I don't have what it takes, I'm afraid of people judging me, which all come up as stress in the body and stop us from moving forward. And then we just go through this simple process of examining those thoughts and beliefs while we're tapping and calming down the stress response and being able to say, oh, yeah, that's not such a big deal. I don't have to be so afraid of that. And people are going to judge me anyway. I might as well go out and have fun.
So when the EFT tapping was first put out there, it had to do with knowledge of the acupuncture meridians, and essentially it's a way to give yourself an acupressure treatment for anything that bothers you physically, mentally, or emotionally. And are you still presenting it that way? Do you talk about the acupuncture meridians, or do you just talk about relieving the stress response?
When I first introduce EFT, particularly in interviews, I will often say it started based on acupuncture, and saying that for thousands of years in Chinese medicine, they've said there's a flow of energy through the body along these pathways called meridians. And when the energy is flowing naturally, we experience our natural state of well-being, physically and emotionally. And when this energy gets stuck, then we don't feel so good. So in traditional acupuncture, the doctor would stick needles in these key points, and we're just tapping with these key points because Roger Callahan, who started this process, he had thought field therapy, which Gary then turned into emotional freedom technique. Dr. Callahan was studying acupressure and was learning about these different meridian points, and helped a woman with her water phobia. She said that the physical manifestation of her phobia was not in her stomach. And he said, oh, okay, I've learned that the one of the key points for the stomach meridian is right here under the eye. Let's see what happens if we tap right there. And not only did the knot in her stomach go away, the lifelong water phobia went away. It's one of those 1 minute wonders that we don't see very often, but it was enough for him to say, wow, this is really interesting, and start experimenting with different patients, and found that by tapping different points based on different meridians, he would choose different algorithms for different issues. And then Gary came along, and Gary's background, he had a degree in engineering. He's thinking, well, let's see if we can simplify this. There's 8 points that we're tapping. Rather than trying to figure out which 2 or 3 points to tap in which order, what if we just tap all of the points in one row and get the same great benefits? So now we have modern research showing that it downregulates cortisol, the stress hormone in our body. There is evidence showing that it affects the vagus nerve. So we're affecting the polyvagal system to downregulate stress and other uncomfortable emotions. So the exact mechanism of how this is working, whether it is a meridian system, whether it is just calming down the amygdala and the fight or flight process, we're not, there isn't one set answer on that. We just know it works.
Well, and the thing that I greatly appreciated about Gary Craig's work back when it first came out was that he put this 80-page PDF on the internet for free. Just download it and read it and start tapping, and you're going to get a certain amount of success right there. And I would tell people, generally speaking, based on your willingness and based on how many traumas are held within you. So that if you have a trauma held within you and you're fearful to look at it, you may not be able to get through it on your own with the tapping. So if you have a coach or if you have a therapist that's willing to support you in this, but that was the thing that just threw the doors wide open. And I was so appreciative that he did that. And then of course he made a whole series of DVDs available for people if they wanted to do training and get more of the
I got them when they're
behind.
VHS tapes.
Yeah.
Even before DVD.
Yeah, it was a lot of them. Most of the ones that I got were just the videos of him doing his seminars. And I had already been trained in a mind-body energy technique that used the acupuncture meridians, but it required muscle testing, applied kinesiology, to determine which meridian was disrupted and which emotion on that meridian and which dynamic in your life today. And I was doing it with a 17-year-old male, which is pretty impressive right there, that he would let me do this weird muscle testing thing with him. And had a few sessions, and he came in one day and said, well, I really like this and it's helping me a lot. But my grandfather says I can get this stuff free off the internet and I don't need that psychologist. So I went out to the parking lot and roughed up his grandfather. No, I asked him to give me the website.
You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. And I was stronger and younger at the time. And so I got the website, looked it up, and he came in the next time. I said, tell your grandfather he's right. This is exactly the same material. And from that point on, I began teaching EFT to every one of my patients who would learn it. To this day, I still teach EFT. But there was about a 10-year stretch where I would teach it 2 or 3 times a year at a fairly local place and make it an all-day seminar so people could do the 9 to 4 and pick up some CEUs, but get really well versed in how it feels to shift their energy and create some kind of a mental structure so they'd have some format for teaching it to others and using it with their clients or whatever. So I wonder if there's a story or two that not just what, Gary did or what happened with TFT, but a story or two that you could share that either you personally have benefited from the use of EFT or one of the many people you've worked with has.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, my life is amazingly different since I started tapping, in the success that, the ability to put myself out there and have personal success as well as make a bigger difference than I ever could have made before. And, and I've had the privilege of working with folks in so many different areas and with so many different issues. I have, one of my favorite stories was a woman who had been, her ex-husband had done something really unfortunate 20 years earlier. They were no longer married, but still, just thinking about it was distressing. And in a matter of, 15, 20 minutes, she was laughing about it. And this thing that had been so upsetting for 20 years, no longer an issue. Working with people with money issues. I used to have a client that I worked with regularly who had a small office with a number of employees. And she said, every so often my staff will say, hey, every time you work with Brad, we all make more money. So set up another session. Because the general abundance vibe in the office would shift. Working with physical issues. I was at a health fair once, and somebody had come over and they were experiencing some back trouble. And they said, oh, it's like an 8 out of 10 in terms of how painful it was. Well, we did some quick tapping and they kind of moved around and said, yeah, that feels better. And a couple hours later, they came back and said, I don't know if you know this, but there's a dance floor over in part of this fair. And we've been over there dancing. What the heck did you do? So it's amazingly beneficial in so many areas. And I know that sometimes people go, oh, it sounds like a panacea. And that's kind of, that's always threatening. But when we think of it as a stress relief technique, and we recognize that stress either causes or worsens most, if not all, of the issues that trouble us, then we can see why having a stress tool like this can help us in so many different areas.
Do you know the work of Dr. John Sarno?
I do. His book helped me a lot years ago.
So he has he created this phrase, tension myoneural syndrome. And his thought is that these people that were coming to him had actual physical pain, but there wasn't anything on their scans that was different than all kinds of people who didn't have any restriction of motion or physical pain. So he discovered that if you reduce the oxygen flow to tissue as little as 10%, it's enough to initiate excruciating pain. And if we lodge our mental emotional stress, let's say here in the shoulder, and there's a bundle of muscles or nerves there that are carrying my energetic stress, it's enough to, keep me from moving my arm very much. So I had a similar situation where I was doing just an intro session. I'm going to be here for 45 minutes. I've got 11 people in a circle and I'm teaching them EFT tapping. And I talked about it a little bit, and then we did a round of tapping, and all of a sudden this woman went like this, "Hey, I can move my arm." And I said, "Okay, that's good." She says, "No, you don't get it. I've been able to move my arm past here for 11 years. Now, is that a miracle cure? No, but it really makes sense if you think about the tension myoneural syndrome. If I'm
Yeah.
holding either a fear of moving my arm or a rage at someone here, and every time I move, it pinches and stabs, like, the kind of muscle cramping that happens that lays NFL players out on the field. It makes really good sense that I can't move my arm very much. And I do a round or two of tapping thinking about that, and the stress gets relieved, and all of a sudden I have full range of motion in my arm. So I really appreciate how there's that, the combination of Dr. Sarno's work and this helps people understand, this isn't just distraction. This isn't just voodoo. This is an energy system we're sitting here in. And if we are not letting the energies be and flow through us and working to their optimal, it creates difficulties for us.
Yep. It's, and we're so, for the most part, so unaware of how much stress we're carrying. And there's always at least some ambient stress, particularly because we're walking around nowadays with a stress device. We have this device that is constantly telling us, here's something else to be upset about, and we just ignore that. It's, I recommend to folks that they tap on a daily basis, because to me it's energy hygiene. We have physical hygiene, like brushing our teeth and taking a shower, and we do it whether we feel we need it or not. We don't wait for 3 weeks, and then when everyone's holding their nose around us going, that's right, I haven't taken a shower in 3 weeks, I should do that. But stress is always building up, and we don't usually recognize it until something really unfortunate happens. And whether it's a physical pain because we're not getting that oxygen flow to the to those parts of our body, or in our behavior, we snap at people, and or worse, we see it on the internet. People are constantly venting all of that stress on social media, and taking actions that are not good for other people, but also not good for themselves. So I recommend to folks, you got to do something to be calming down that stress and clearing that stuff out of your system, because you're going to feel better emotionally as well as physically.
Yeah, the mental emotional hygiene is key in the work I do with people. And once I have somebody in a session who's willing to learn it, I recommend they tap a minimum of 3 times a day. And that's just for the average person that's got some mild issues. And if they have anxiety, I recommend 5 to 10 times a day. And I wonder if you could say something about the use of, or the relevance for dealing with trauma of using EFT tapping. Do you deal in that realm at all?
A little bit. I'm not a licensed therapist, so I'm pretty good about. I try to be pretty good about my scope of practice, but it does come up because so many people have had that, and tapping is it can be a very powerful tool for that, because when we've experienced a trauma, we naturally don't want to go and stand in that and talk about it because it's painful. But if we don't, then it's hard to resolve it. And so the tapping calms down the emotional distress such that it gives us more leeway to work with that. And you're probably familiar with the work of Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and he talks about how he uses tapping along with EMDR when working with folks on trauma, because it just makes it facilitates that process of addressing the traumatic events, and as well as calming down the physical and emotional experience when we reflect on the trauma.
Well, and it's so important. Years ago, Babette Rothschild wrote a book, The Body Remembers. And there's a newer book by, I think it's Bessel, that The Body Keeps Score.
Keeps the score.
But one of the key things from The Body Remembers book was this idea that it isn't going to help me to have people go in and get flooded with all of the emotions of their trauma And so if I, as a therapist, can watch the early warning signs that someone's moving from the parasympathetic response into the sympathetic or the agitated response, and have a way to bring them back and focus and calm them down to get them to understand they are safe. They're safe because they're sitting in my office, and they wouldn't have even gone to a therapist that didn't feel safe, or they wouldn't start working in the trauma work if they weren't safe. And so if we keep this calming skill, and people talk about it as building resources, and well, that's basically what you can do with EFT tapping, is you can help people calm and build the awareness that they have. If they didn't walk into your office with it, they can develop the skill to calm themselves in just about any situation.
Yeah. It's the quickest way I know to expedite the parasympathetic nervous system, to give the all clear and say, okay, everything is safe. There is no wild animal in the room. It's okay for us to relax.
Yeah, and combined with a calming breath, there's just nothing better I have found for it. I also use it a lot in conjunction with others, like you were just mentioning Bessel van der Kolk doing it with EMDR, with other techniques and tools that people prefer over, say, EMDR. If they start to get agitated, I'll frequently just initiate some tapping. And they can either tap with me, or they can just get the benefit of the fact that I'm calming down in the room with them. And borrowing benefits, or there was a phrase like that Gary Craig had. He recognized that even if you're just tapping, or you're just thinking about your issues when somebody else is tapping on their issues, you can get a benefit, because so much of this is energy flow. And what we aren't taught, but is getting more and more press these days, is my thoughts, my mind energy is a real energy that affects this whole system dramatically. So, I've had people that don't want to tap with me, so I'll tap while they sit there, and they'll talk about their issue, and I will start using phrases relative to their issue. Sometimes they start feeling better enough that they'll tap. Sometimes they just feel better.
And the borrowing benefits of being able to benefit from whatever tapping someone else might be doing, and also what we call surrogate tapping, where we'll tap for someone else. And I've done this where I've been with someone who is experiencing some distress, but they may not be willing to tap or may not be familiar with it. And I'll, subtly be stimulating meridian points. And some people say, well, is that ethical to tap for someone else? Well, you can pray for someone else, right? And we can't control someone else's experience, but since everything is energy and we're all connected energetically, as we calm down, now, whether it's, you could say, well, it's the energetic field. I'm calming down the energetic field, and so that helps people. We also are learning more and more about mirror neurons. So someone else, as they perceive me calming down because of the tapping, their mirror neurons will help them to calm down by virtue of that system. So there's all kinds of different ways that can help. And it may be that we're in a matrix, and if I'm calming down and I'm feeling better, it's just my perception of the other people that they seem to be more calm.
Well,
it's all win-win.
That's right. It's win-win-win. And I routinely would teach people about tapping, and tapping with and for their children. And if their children don't want to tap, just tap on yourself. Because if you're the parent and your son or daughter is having a tantrum in a store, you get, oh my God, people are going to see me as a bad parent. My anxiety goes up. If I'm just tapping for myself, there's benefit. There was a wonderful story of somebody I taught the tapping to, and he went home and he was asked to babysit his granddaughter, about 7 years old, and she was having a horrible time going to sleep at night. And so he used the tapping with her, and she went right to sleep. And the next time he went over and it was bedtime, he said, well, do you want me to help you tap? And she said, no, that makes me sleep. But now that we've introduced the topic of children, could you tell us about the Wizard's Wish?
Yeah, absolutely. I copy right there. The Wizard's Wish. So my interview was being filmed for the movie The Tapping Solution, where Jessica Ordner, was the conversation turned to children and how, children have so much potential. And if we're always working with adults and helping them clear up limiting beliefs that are holding them back in their adult life, it's like, wow, what if we could teach this to kids early on and start that before that becomes, is shutting them down and blocking their opportunities in life. And I started thinking, well, it would be great to have a children's story for this, because I have kids and we loved reading books to our kids. And I have always, loved wizards. I have Harry Potter ones all over my office here. And so I thought, wouldn't it be cool if it was a story about a wizard who uses his fingers as a wand to help clear out these upsetting feelings? So that's how The Wizard's Wish came about.
And it's a children's book that's available where?
You can get that on Amazon or at thewizardswish.com. And it's been translated into 25 or 6 languages now.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, I was thrilled that years ago, some people came up with some songs that, very kid-friendly songs to do the tapping with. And very grateful to find out that you had that book. Amazing. I didn't know about it until now, till doing the interview. But so if you think about it, what's an aspect of the work you do, or EFT, or some project that you have coming up that we haven't even asked you about yet?
Well, I'm the big project coming up right now is today I'm starting a 5-day challenge called the Tap Into Your Best Self Challenge, where I'm going to be doing Facebook Live events each day. So challenging people to do some in-depth tapping every day to clear out those aspects that what stops us from being our best self. And I always talk about the Michelangelo principle and how Michelangelo said the statue is already there inside the marble. I just have to chip away what doesn't belong to reveal the masterpiece inside. So taking that concept of our best self is already in there, and it's looking at what are those beliefs, those fears, those doubts that stop us from seeing ourselves as our best self, and then taking the actions, making the choices that our best self would make, and using the tapping to clear that away. So I'm very excited about spending the week doing this, because one, I love sharing this work with folks, and having, the more people being their best selves and tapping away that other stuff, the better the world gets. But also because I'm always tapping with people while I'm doing it. So I get all the benefits from that too. When I did a challenge like this earlier in the year, had just an amazing week. Looking forward to a week like that.
Right. It's amazing. I had the experience of when I was teaching this a lot, and I'd get a lot of new patients. Things would go smoother. Everything would be great. And I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I'd have a little rough dream, and I would think about it and I would tap right away. I've even had the situation where there's so much going on in my life. I'm teaching it so often with different patients, or in that course that I mentioned, that I found myself waking up to my tapping. There was something upsetting happening in the dream, and I woke up and startled myself because I was tapping on my forehead in the middle of the night and in my sleep. But there's also been times when I drift away from it. I don't have that many new patients. I haven't taught the class for a few months. My life seems to be going well. And then I have a bad dream, and I get up and I do the refrigerator run or the bathroom run. I go back to sleep, and I wake up the next morning and I realized I tossed and turned for an hour and I didn't think about tapping. So it's keeping it top of mind for me is very helpful, which is one of the reasons that I recommend people do it and make it a habit. And I definitely benefit from how much I teach it, because I'm doing it on myself when I'm teaching it to someone.
Yeah.
And as you said, this concept of having it be the mental emotional hygiene, you called it energetic hygiene, is so spot on for me, because it doesn't take much in today's world for the stresses to build up and for me to get distracted from the things that really work well for me, and then to find myself limping along and realize, oh, I've got some tools I could use.
Yeah. And by the time we've recognized, oh, I'm kind of limping along, we're already on our knees or waist deep in mud or something like that. And it's like, so I created I printed out a little habit tracker that I offer on my website, and it just has a list of daily habits, and you just check off each day when you do it. And the first thing I have pre-printed in there is tap. so that people are met, because I see all the time. And I'll often hear from people saying, yeah, I don't get it. I know that tapping works. I know that when I'm doing it, I feel so much better. And then I forget and I stop myself. And I say, it's brilliant, because self-sabotage is simply misguided self-love. And there is a part of us that is afraid of change. And so part of us says, man, if we keep this tapping stuff up, things are going to change. We might increase our income. We'll have to move. People will be jealous. We need to knock this off. It's like if somebody goes on a diet and they start losing weight and they start to get unwelcome attention, part of the mind is going to say, wow, this losing weight is a bad idea. So when we look at suddenly eating a pint of ice cream or forgetting to tap, we can objectively say, well, that's kind of self-sabotage. But it's allowing ourselves to be compassionate with ourselves and say, oh, it's an act of self-love because I'm trying to protect myself from an unfortunate consequence that I think will occur. And then it's allowing ourselves to say, okay, let me look at it this another way. Is it possible that I can still get the benefits and manage those consequences?
Yeah. Is there a way that part of my mind that's trying to be protective can be protective and still have me function well?
Yep. Finding healthier ways to protect ourselves.
And, that's rooted in the observation that basically everything we do, we've got reasons for doing.
People do what works.
Yeah. And we may
Maybe
not be
not in a
consciously
logical
aware.
way.
Well, or consciously, right? I mean, it's helping me if I'm starting to, lose weight and all of a sudden I eat half chocolate cake right before bed. And that part of my mind that knows, hey, when you were fit as a fiddle and ready for love, it didn't work out so well, right? You were unfaithful, or there were too many people, or sexual advances you didn't want. And so that part of my mind has really good reasons for staying heavier. But if I'm not consciously aware of it, I can't dismantle it.
Yeah. And we have all kinds of positive associations to unhealthy food. Parties always have cake or something like that. So when we're in a situation and we're not consciously thinking about things, but something about us doesn't feel right, and part of our brain is going, man, we're kind of feeling down. We need to pick me up. What makes us feel good? Well, chocolate makes us feel good. So that unconsciously, we find ourselves, we've gone through half a bag of cookies and like, when did I grab this bag of cookies? Why did I? Because we have this programming. Cookies make us feel better. So we have all kinds of different reasons allowing us to recognize, because what then happens too often is we beat ourselves up. Oh, I'm so stupid for eating those cookies. I'm so stupid for not tapping. I'm so stupid for showing up late to that interview where I could have gotten a really good job and I totally blew it by showing up late. And we beat ourselves up, which is also brilliant, because the more time we spend beating ourselves up, the less time we have to spend making those changes that we were afraid of. It's like, oh, well, I'll improve things tomorrow, because I'm out of time today. So, oh, well. And then tomorrow we start the cycle over and we stay in our comfort zone. There's a part of it. There's a reason why we stay in our comfort zone, and we have less health than we objectively would want. We have less wealth than we would understandably want to have, and there's an expression of, if you're not changing it, you're choosing it. But we're choosing it at an unconscious level. Most of the choices that we make are unconscious, and they're choices that we made yesterday and the day before. And to break that cycle. And so when we try to make those changes, we have a stress response that pushes us in a different direction. And I like to say it's kind of like a chess grandmaster. If we say that, well, I'm tired of being single, I'd like to meet somebody. And we're at a grocery store and we see this attractive stranger a little ways away. And the chess grandmaster is now working 50 moves ahead. I could go up and say hi. They'd say hi back. We might start a conversation. We might get along. We might find out we have some things in interest. We might go out on a date. That date could lead to a second date and a third date. And eventually we date and move in together and get married, and they divorce me and ruin my life. Oh, look, there's a sale on aisle 2. And we're down on aisle 2 before we've even consciously been aware of this. And we're looking at the sale item going, I wish I could meet somebody. It's because of all this stress that's happening that says, get out of here, get out of here. So to have a way of calming that system down when we're aware of it, but then also even when we're not in that situation, to be looking at what is the behavior that I get into? What are the beliefs that I have? Why would that make me feel unsafe? That's why I have people close their eyes and imagine what it is they say that they want. And then I say, okay, now say it's safe to have this, and rate that on a scale of 0 to 10. And they're often surprised by how low the number is. People say, well, I want to have more money. Close your eyes. Imagine you have all the money you want. How safe is it? Oh, it's like a 2 or a 3. Now you know. If you had a young child that was invited to a birthday party and you were thinking about the house where that party was, and you rated that, you thought, how safe is it for my child to go to that party? And you said, it's about a 2 out of 10. Would you let your kid go to that party? We're brilliantly protecting ourselves. And it's allowing ourselves
from things we're not aware of.
Yeah.
At the conscious level. Yeah.
So if we can make it conscious, or at least allow ourselves to be aware of the sensation. Okay, when I think about having that much money, I don't know what I'm afraid of, but I get this knot in my stomach. We can start from there, even though I have this knot in my stomach, and we start to break it down. And when we're tapping, it's often like peeling layers of the onion. And so we're tapping this knot in my stomach, this knot in my stomach, oh my goodness. I remember when I was 5 years old and my dad was just railing about people who had money and how greedy and awful they were. And there's a big fight in my family. And I realized it was never good to have money. Great. That was Dad's opinion. It was misguided. I can clear that out now and recognize there's a lot of people with a lot of money who do really good things.
Yeah, it's interesting how the mind works. When you were saying the chess grandmaster, about the third time you said it, my mind said the stress grandmaster. So he's managing the stress in a way that I'm not aware of, but it's my stress built on my beliefs. And, this is a wonderful thing, because you start to introduce people to the concept that they can be holding beliefs they're not even aware of.
Yeah.
Right. And you begin to make it more acceptable for them to start exploring the fears they're holding and the beliefs they're holding that they're not even aware of.
Behavior is about consequence management. We're trying to manage the consequences, and we're doing this cost benefit analysis. This chess or stress grandmaster is looking down and going, what are the pros and cons? What are the pros and cons? Okay. And so when we've made that unfortunate choice, that objectively unfortunate choice of eating a bag of cookies or being late to an interview or whatever it might be, then okay, somewhere in the cost benefit analysis, I have more in favor of the cookies than health, more in favor of showing up late and staying where I am than getting a job that could potentially change my life. And allowing ourselves to then look at, okay, how did I come to that conclusion? I always say, if you could open your brain and follow the neural pathways and all of the experiences, you could look at any choice that you say was a terrible mistake, and you'd look at the pathways and go, oh yeah, I totally see why I made that choice.
Exactly. Absolutely. Well, I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to chat with you about this. What's the website you would most direct people to?
The place where you can find most of my resources is at tapwithbrad.com. I went through so many URLs early on, and then folks like you said, oh yeah, I tell a lot of people, tap with Brad. That would make it simple.
There it is, right in front of you.
So tapwithbrad.com, that'll lead you to events that I'm doing, or my YouTube channel and programs and all kinds of fun stuff like that.
And the children's book is The Wizard's Wish.
And that is available there too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I look forward to the next time we're together chatting, at least through video. I think that's coming up
we have
in October.
A panel coming up.
Yeah. At Integrative Mental Health Summit.org, if people want to get access to that. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to chatting to you later.
Thanks, Timothy. It was great spending time with you.
Brad Yates is known internationally for his creative and often humorous use of emotional freedom techniques known as EFT. Brad is the author of the best-selling children's book, The Wizard's Wish. He's also the co-author of the bestseller Freedom at Your Fingertips, and he's a featured expert in the film The Tapping Solution. Brad has also been a presenter at a number of events, including Jack Canfield's Breakthrough to Success, and has done teleseminars with The Secret stars Bob Doyle and Dr. Joe Vitale. Brad has been heard internationally on a number of internet radio talk shows, and he also has over 1,000 YouTube videos that have been viewed over 34 million times. More information is available at tapwithbrad.com.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.